It's somewhere else. Good evening. Thank you all for joining us for the February 1st, 2022 meeting of the Buncombe County Commission. If we could start the introductory video, please. I'd like to call the February 1st, 2022 meeting of the Buncombe County Commission to order. Thank you all for being with us this evening. Let's begin our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise and join us in the pledge. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I want to announce that there's parking validation and bus passes available for any members of the public who use them to attend the meeting this evening. You can get validation from one of the officers who is with us this evening. You can see them on the way out. It's valid for today only. I want to read the ethics reminder to the board. In accordance with the Code of Ethics adopted by the board, all county commissioners have a duty to obey all applicable laws regarding official actions, to uphold the integrity and independence of the office, to avoid impropriety in the exercise of official duties, to faithfully perform the duties of the office, and to conduct the affairs of the governing board in an open and public manner. Is there any item on the agenda, the outcome of which would have a direct, substantial, and readily identifiable financial impact for any board member? Does any board member have a financial interest in any public contract coming before the board today? There being none, all board members have a duty and obligation to vote on any matters voted on by the Board of Commissioners at this meeting. Commissioners, we come to the consent agenda. Are there any questions about any items on the consent agenda? We are going to have a short, we're going to pull off the funding for the Code Purple shelter budget amendment. We're going to have a short piece of information on that or question. Any other items? All right, Commissioner Beach-Ferrara requested to have a short discussion of this item.
Thank you. Excuse me, just wanted to take a moment to kind of pause and discuss this, partly because it relates to a conversation we just had at our briefing around broader strategies around homelessness and responding to the range of needs we know exist in our community around housing and homelessness. And also just want to take a moment to lift up and thank the really incredible providers and agencies in our community who are staffing up Code Purple shelters and providing shelter services all year round, particularly for Code Purple, ABCCM, Salvation Army, and a very inspiring community-led pop-up high-access shelter that's happening at Trinity UMC Church. And just having heard from those range of providers and having had a chance to sit in on and listen to a Code Purple Coalition meeting recently, I think it's so clear that we are seeing not just the temperatures drop on some very cold nights, but just the level of need in our community grow around this, and just hearing a lot of stories of really high level of collaboration across these agencies and really ensuring that everyone who shows up does indeed have a safe bed for the night and access to services to help refer them for hopefully housing options and the health care they need and deserve. So just wanted to kind of take a moment to lift this up and connect the dots between a budget ordinance on our consent agenda and some of the broader conversations we're having at the commission level, but also at the community level around how we're addressing affordable housing, homelessness, mental health issues, addiction, and the intersection of all these issues in the lives of people. So that was it. I just wanted to kind of flag some of those.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. Are there any members of the public who have any questions about any items on the consent agenda? All right, we did want to add one item to the agenda, which is an item we planned on addressing in our briefing meeting but ran out of time, which is basically an informational presentation around draft affordable housing goals. So is there a motion to approve the consent agenda to follow the remainder of the agenda as published with the addition of an informational presentation on draft affordable housing goals?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Okay, we now come to public comment. The time limit for individual comment to the board is 3 minutes. If your time expires, you can leave any question along with your name, address, and phone number with the county manager. Board members are not expected to comment during the public comment period. This is the chance for the public to address the board. We have a couple of folks who have signed up. The first, and I think they want to come up together, is April Burgess-Johnson and Jenny Raviota from Helpmate. So come on up. And there'll be a yellow light that goes off when you've got about 30 seconds, and a red light will go off when your time is up. And we do ask that folks please discontinue your public comments once your time's up, because we want to give everyone the same amount of time.
Good evening. I'm Jenny Raviota, the board chair for Helpmate, and this is April Burgess-Johnson, our executive director. We promise to be tonight's shortest speakers. Tonight you'll be hearing the very first report from Buncombe County's Domestic Violence Fatality Review Team. We would like to take this moment to speak briefly about the impact of emergency shelter for domestic violence survivors. Helpmate has provided safety, shelter, and support for domestic violence victims in Buncombe County for well over 40 years. Annually, we serve about 3,500 survivors. Our emergency shelter serves those at highest risk of homicide, and 91% of victims living in our shelter are in the extreme risk category for danger of being murdered by their partner. There's a strong correlation between lack of available domestic violence specific emergency shelter beds and high rates of domestic violence homicides. Over a 10-year span, the top 3 counties in North Carolina for the number of domestic violence victims who could not be sheltered due to lack of space were Buncombe County, Durham County, and Guilford County. The top 3 counties for domestic violence homicides were also Buncombe County, Durham County, and Guilford County.
Without question, Buncombe County has a problem with homelessness and lack of affordable housing. Domestic violence is the leading cause of homelessness for women and children. Access to domestic violence shelter is also an equity issue. 11% of Buncombe County is comprised of people of color. However, 41% of the survivors who reside in Helpmate shelter are people of color. We cannot force communities of color to simultaneously bear the highest burden of violence while doing so without an option to escape. Helpmate shelter can currently accommodate 20 people at a time. Research tells us that to prevent homicides, we need 40 beds. Helpmate has purchased the land needed to double the size of our emergency shelter, and we're right now in the pre-construction planning phase. In a 20-year time span, this emergency shelter will serve as safe haven for 10,000 adult and child victims who are homeless due to abuse. That means that the average cost per victim is only $1,000. We humbly request that you continue to consider Helpmate's request for rescue plan funds to support the much-needed expansion of domestic violence shelter in our community, to promote equity, to prevent homelessness, and to save lives. Thank you.
Thank you both. The next person who signed up is Don Yelton.
I was sitting outside in the parking lot a while ago, listening to the pre-meeting, because I figured we would have a discussion on affordable housing, because I listened to a committee of affordable housing that had only 3 members of the Board of Commissioners on it, and they were pushing for 30, 60 million for affordable housing and wanted to get it on the agenda. I come in today and we're calling up the goals for affordable housing that quick. That is the reason, and I hope y'all listen to me. Sometimes you don't, sometimes you probably get mad at me. But if you stop and think about what you were told today by your consultant that you paid for or your employee, I don't know. He said that the average person felt left out. Why? If I can come up here and tell you what you're going to push today before it got put on there, and the only reason I can do that is because I've watched 2 meetings that was televised this week, then what do you think the average person knows? Nothing. Zip. He also said that your TV network was not being utilized. I'm going to make a suggestion to you that you put your county commissioners meetings, you put all your committee meetings on that TV channel. Not everybody's got computers, folks. There are a few of us old folks around, but I've learned how to use one. So use your channel. Use what you've got to let people know what's going on. And you know that's a good idea whether you like it or not. And that's the reason I'm here telling you that. Because you have the wherewithal to do it and make the common person, average Joe Blow, feel like he's getting his share of equity. Because it's not about just race, folks. It's about everything. It's about what you want to do, how you do it, and what are you doing. And all these causes you got, if you fund all of them, they're all good, but if you fund all of them, you're going to be broke. And by the way, trash drop-offs. I heard a question about that, and I got 45 seconds. I may be messed up on my timing a little bit since I've not been here the last 2 meetings. But if you put a trash drop-off out in the county, you know why the rural people don't want it? It's a junk heap. It's trash. It gets trashed up. So there is a way to add trash pickup to your tax bill without making it excessively expensive, because you have a commissioner up there whose neighbor is paying about $45 a week, a month in Asheville for the trash service, and they don't even use it because he's helping the neighbor. So if you want to solve your trash problem, you might want to talk to somebody that's dealt in trash ever since I've been in Buncombe County. Thank you very much. The time is not messed up.
All right, thank you. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak during public comment? Yes.
Hi, my name is Roy Harris, and I live at 59 Bartlett Street. I think I was here about 4 months ago, and I was talking about us legacy members of the community and our tax values and our tax going up. Well, I was one of the lucky recipients of one of the grants. And thank you. Thank you for providing that last $500 that I was able to pay my taxes for this year. Of course, they had gone up something like 30%, but that was a big help to me at that time of year and during that time that I was able to be granted that. And I don't know, there was a young lady that helped me through the process. I put in like an application, and she helped me through that process. And I can't remember her name, and I don't know whether she worked for the tax collection department, but she was very helpful. She asked me very simple questions. She didn't have an attitude. And she answered the questions, and she said, Mr. Harris, I will get back to you within a couple of days. And she did. And in fact, after I had finished talking to her, I was thinking that I would never hear from her again or hear from this department. So thank you. It allows me to stay here one more year, and I hope forever. And so as us legacy community members that have been here for 25, 30 years, we need help to number one, keep our dwellings where we're at, and number two, to be able to now stay in the neighborhood. Even though my neighborhood is changing, it still allows me to stay in that neighborhood and to live there as long as I possibly can. My neighborhood is changing. More fences are going up. More things are changing as it goes through this process and everything. But I'm going to hold on and hang on as long as I possibly can in that neighborhood and to be a part of it. I went to an 8th grade class yesterday, and they were reading a book called Stamped. And so they've asked me to come back to that class and tell them stories. And the Stamp is about, I haven't read the book yet, but it's about this next generation coming along, what they're going to face. And some of the issues that they're going to face, they don't have to leave Buncombe County not to face those, because they're here. And so, thanks again for helping me to be here for another year. And thanks again for for all that you do and all that you're going to do and all that you will do. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. It's good to see you, and we appreciate your feedback for the folks who helped out with the application. We appreciate it very much. Anyone else? All right. Next on the agenda, got a couple of different presentations. And the first item is a proclamation for Black Legacy Month. And Rachel Edens is here, and Commissioner Al Whitesides is going to present and read the proclamation.
Commissioner Whiteside, I'd also like to invite to.
Oh, sure. Invite them up, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I have two county employees here with me as I present this tonight, and this is, by the way, the first time that we have done this. You might introduce yourself because you're brand new. We hadn't met before. Yeah, go ahead.
I am. It's a pleasure to meet you and
Yeah.
anyone here that I haven't met. My name is Rachel Edens, and I'm the Chief Equity and Human Rights Officer.
And I'm Tiffany Ihanocho, Justice Service Director, but I'm also a member of the Equity and Inclusion Work Group.
And by the way, the Equity Inclusion Work Group has done an excellent job. And I'm Al Whitesides, County Commissioner, and I've been in the county longer than both of them. I've been around a long time, folks. But before I read the proclamation, I'd like to take a minute to sort of, since this is the first time we're doing this in Buncombe, we need to talk about Black History Month and how it came about. Black History Month is an annual celebration of achievements by African Americans and a time for recognizing their central role in U.S. history. Also known as African American History Month, the event grew out of Negro History Week, the brainchild of noted historian Carter G. Woodson and other prominent African Americans. Since 1976, every U.S. president has officially designated the month of February as Black History Month. Other countries around the world, including Canada and the United Kingdom, also devote a month to celebrating Black history. People from African and Caribbean backgrounds have been a fundamental part of British history for centuries. However, some believe their value and contribution to society is often overlooked, ignored, or distorted. Most schools still teach a history curriculum which focuses on traditional events and the achievements of white figures. Black History Month gives everyone the opportunity to share, celebrate, and understand the impact of Black heritage and culture. Now I'd like to read the proclamation. County of Buncombe Proclamation, Black Legacy Month. Whereas Buncombe County is committed to creating an inclusive community that celebrates diversity and ensures all residents have equitable opportunities to lead healthy, peaceful, safe, and sustainable lives. And whereas in honoring the cultures, traditions, and accomplishments of Black and African Americans that have shared our country, we also acknowledge our nation's history of colonialism that has inflicted slavery, discrimination, deprivation, violence, and genocide upon Black people. And whereas in 1926, Carter G. Woodson and Minister James E. Moreland laid the foundation for Black History Month because the accomplishments of Black Americans were all but erased from national history and underrepresented in important policy decisions. And whereas in 1976, President Gerald Ford made Black History Month a national observance, and whereas during Black History Month, we celebrate the many achievements and contributions made by Black Americans like Nina Simone, Roberta Flack, E.W. Pearson, and Isaac Dixon to Buncombe County's economic, cultural, spiritual, and political development. And whereas we honor the memory of the millions of enslaved Africans who died during the transatlantic slave trade, and whereas by transitioning from looking back on history and celebrating the legacy of our Black and African American community members, we create a culture of mutual respect. And whereas the legacy of Black leadership has long been a bedrock of Buncombe County, including at Stevens Lee High School, the Castle on the Hill, of which I'm a graduate, that served 900 Black students, where Mrs. Eleanor M. Foster was a member of the faculty that was known as the first African American woman in Asheville to receive a master's degree. And whereas we call our community's attention to the continuing need to battle racism and to build a society that lives up to the democratic ideals through relationships like the declaration of racism as a public health and safety crisis and the implementation of racial equity, of our racial equity action plan. And whereas Buncombe County joins the city of Asheville in our commitment to reparations, and whereas the Buncombe County libraries, including the Buncombe County Special Collections, offer curated content for all ages about Black legacy, not just in February, but year-round. And whereas we seek to repair the trauma of past oppression and broken trust by celebrating the legacy of Black cultures and voices striving together to build a future of shared hope and promise for all. Now, therefore, be it resolved that on this first day of February 2022, the Buncombe County Board of Commissioners does hereby proclaim February 2022 as Black Legacy Month. a time to celebrate the rich and diverse culture of Black and African American people, to raise awareness about our shared history, to recognize that truth must come before reconciliation, and to acknowledge the important contributions that Black and African American people have made to our community and our nation. And signed, Brownie Newman, Chair, Buncombe County Board of Commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Whitesides, and thank you to the Board of Commissioners. I'd just like to say that I'm encouraged, I'm buoyed, and I'm hopeful upon hearing this proclamation today and acknowledging the fact that we are representing and living Black legacy, not simply Black history, that Black culture and Black communities are not a thing of the past. We are vibrant and moving into the future. And so today, I'm glad to stand here with all of you in this room, ahead of the people that came behind us and with our youth and our communities in front of us, to literally embody the concept of Sankofa, which is a Ghanaian Twi word that literally means to go back and get it. And so we take the best from our past and we use that in the present to make a brighter future. So thank you again so very much.
All right, thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. Thank you, Commissioner. All right, Commissioner Whitesides, thank you so much for presenting and reading the proclamation. All right, the next presentation is from the Domestic Violence Fatality Review Team findings. And we've got Paulina Mendez and other folks here to help us with this item. Thanks for being here, all of you.
Thank you so much for having us, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Paulina Mendez. I'm the Family Justice Division Manager, and I am excited to present these findings alongside Catherine Watkins and Kelda Harrison, who are also members of the DVFRT. Catherine is the Social Work Program Manager for Family In-Home, and Kelda is a mom, small business owner, and she advocates for people experiencing domestic violence by sharing her lived experience. You've probably heard the saying, it's not a marathon, it's not a sprint, it's a relay race. Well, this presentation has been a relay race, and so I just want to take a moment to acknowledge all of the hard work that the team has put in and acknowledge the previous FJC coordinators for the work that they did to get us here. So thank you to Julie Klipp and Diana Sierra. I know they're watching, so thank you, everyone. So in a nutshell, the Buncombe County Domestic Violence Fatality Review Team is we're a team that works across systems to identify gaps and prevent DV-related homicides. Our roles and duties are defined by NC General Assembly, the NC General Assembly in Session Laws 2009-52 and 2013-70. This wheel here should look familiar. It's the coordinated community response. And so what I do want to highlight is that the DVFRT is just one piece of the puzzle to help make our community safer. In 2013, Buncombe County tied with Wake County, a jurisdiction nearly 4 times its size, for the highest number of domestic violence homicides. We came together to create this coordinated community response, and the Family Justice Center came out of this, as well as the DVFRT. So in 2020, the first intensive 2-day case review was completed. And what I'll note before I hand it over to Catherine and Kelda to present the findings and the recommendations is that the recommendations aren't in a particular order of importance. They're all a priority, so I do want to note that. But if you do look in your reports, you'll see that there's an impact effort matrix that was created that highlights the level of impact that we think we can make, as well as the level of ease that we think we can accomplish those things. So I am going to turn it over to Catherine.
Thanks, Paulina. This is our timeline for our review. As you can see, we began the process back in December 2018, and we're finally able to complete the review in January 2020. Because it was our first review, it took us some time to coordinate and gather all the needed materials and resources for the actual review. You will also notice that the review concluded right at the point where the pandemic was about to kick into full gear, and that directly impacted our ability to report back to you all. However, we are the little engine that could, and we kept chugging along, and so we're finally able to share our results and findings with you today and our recommendations. The review itself took place over 2 full days, and as Paulina mentioned, the team consisted of representatives from the court system, the medical representation, the school system, DSS, law enforcement, and survivors of past domestic violence, just to name a few. After an intense 2 days, we were able to identify a number of key elements that did impact the situation, and this includes the following. There is a link between people with disabilities and being victims of abuse and domestic violence. The person who committed the murder has a consistent history of violence, which included threats of violence, strangulation, and also a substance use disorder and mental health issues. Incarceration did not help prevent him from future crime. Poverty, race, education, and socioeconomic status did have an impact on resources and opportunities available to the victim and the offender. The person who committed the murder had characteristics that were indicative of a batterer, which included isolation and escalation of violence. The isolation that we saw in this review came out through the way the offender limited the victim's access to her phone, and we see that as a key element in the power and control tool that was used in the review of this case. The consequences of the school to prison pipeline are significant, and early intervention and engagement of youth are important. There was consistent engagement with the medical sector. However, there were numerous system failures for both the victim and offender, and that came out in lack of follow-through with referrals for needed services. And now I'll hand it over to Kelda for her to go through our recommendations.
In our first recommendation, we recommend that the magistrate's domestic violence bond form should be revised to move multiple domestic violence warrants by the same complainant as an aggravating factor instead of a mitigating factor, and to add an option for aggravating factor of isolation or lack of ability to call for help. When we reviewed the case, we looked at the domestic violence bond form and were very surprised to see that multiple domestic violence warrants by the same complainant was listed as a mitigating factor instead of an aggravating factor. If there are multiple warrants by the same complainant, this most likely means there is serious violence happening, and this should be considered in the setting of the bond. It's already really difficult for survivors to report these things to the magistrate, and we need to take that into account when reviewing this form. These recommendations parallel my personal experience, because based on my personal experience, it's not easy to take out a warrant when there are violations of domestic violence orders. Recommendation 2, interagency training, trauma-informed and domestic violence focused for law enforcement, magistrates, judges, prosecutors, victim witness assistance personnel, school personnel, and social services employees, along with ongoing training for smaller law enforcement agencies. Individuals in these agencies that come in contact with people experiencing domestic violence should be trained in trauma-informed practices. For example, court should be a place where survivors find justice, not a place where we feel shamed and re-victimized. We're excited that the Family Justice Center received funding in the recently awarded DOJ grant to provide this type of training. In recommendation 3, we would like to ask to create work groups. The first work group would be a lethality assessment protocol work group. The purpose of this would be to increase accountability and accurate use of the protocol. We currently have a LAP coordinator, but we're also recommending a LAP work group. This protocol is so important because documentation on the scene is vital to the victim's safety, as well as their success with holding the perpetrator accountable in court. We also recommend a courthouse work group. This is really, really important, especially based, again, it parallels my experience. It's really important for survivors to avoid loss of income, loss of time, and re-traumatization in court. So a work group like this is of the utmost importance. We also recommend a protocol work group. The Domestic Violence Fatality Review Team would like more education on protocols for domestic violence offenders. The hope is that this team could also identify what's working and what's not working. We believe it's important to have multidisciplinary teams that include survivor representation. And I personally would like to volunteer to be a part of those groups if they are created. Recommendation number 4, strengthen efforts, interventions, supports regarding trauma-informed early childhood and school-age programs and increase access to services. When reviewing the case, we realized that the perpetrator had fallen through the cracks since childhood. The team recommends strengthening interventions and supports in early childhood and school-age programs. We don't have to wait till people are adults in this system before we reach out to help them. Prevention is key. We do have resources in our community. Family Justice Center partners that already have youth outreach programs include Helpmate, Our Voice, and Mountain Child Advocacy Center. The county also recently filled the Youth Justice Division Manager position. Recommendation 5, acknowledge the intersection of poverty, race, mental health, and substance use disorder and the impacts on domestic violence. There were a lot of compounding factors in this case, each adding another layer of difficulty and stigma. We recommend increasing training and resources around mental health, substance use, and affordable housing, and how they intersect with domestic violence. We also recommend increasing access to these services. In my case, I had to wait to build a house through mountain housing opportunities before leaving my abusive relationship. If there aren't options, people will stay in these relationships. Stability is necessary for people to be able to heal.
So that concludes our findings and recommendations. I do want to point out that some of this work has been happening. You saw the timeline, and that we're the little engine that could. So some of this work has been happening and parallel some of the recommendations that have been made. As we do more cases, we're going to be able to find more gaps and more patterns in those gaps. And I am happy to say that yesterday we did select our next 2 cases, so we will be moving forward with those. Do y'all have any questions?
I don't think there are any at this time, but we really appreciate you all coming and for the work on the development of the recommendations and the associated research and findings around it. So thank you all for being with us tonight and for sharing this update. We really appreciate it.
Thank y'all.
All right, Commissioners, next we will have the informational presentation on the draft affordable housing goals from the Affordable Housing Subcommittee. We appreciate the Commission being willing to add this item to the agenda for the regular meeting this evening. And so again, this is just an informational presentation. We're not asking for any decisions from the Commission this evening. And some of the recommendations we're going to be talking about, I mean, these are all draft recommendations. Some of them are probably more firmed up than others, and we'll talk about a little bit about that as we go through them. And in addition to the recommendations, part of what I think we wanted to do was to just sort of describe at a really high level some of the different tools in the toolbox that we see to be able to go from where we are today in terms of investing in this important priority to really ramp up the development of new affordable housing in the community and some of the different scenarios that could be out there to pursue that. So I'm going to go through a couple of slides, and then I'll ask Parker and Amanda to also share any thoughts they would like to as well. And of course, we're happy to answer any questions. If you have any as we're going through this, feel free to chime in or wait till we're through. All right. So first, I know, as I think it goes without saying, we're all aware that this is a significant need in the community. The community survey that we just saw during the briefing meeting highlighted how our community recognizes what a great need this is, and recognizing that while this is a great place to live, this is an area where the community has a real challenge on our hands. The number of households in our community that are considered severely cost burdened, meaning they're spending more than 50% of all of their income on just meeting their housing needs, is over 7,000 households in the community. The research in this area shows that the greatest needs we have are for affordable efficiency in one-bedroom apartments, but there's also a significant need for new homes and apartments that provide 2 and 3 bedrooms as well for larger families. Next slide, please. So the draft goals that our subcommittee has worked on, and we've been working on this for over 6 months, and our subcommittee has actually been meeting twice every month to work on these goals. We used to meet once a month, but we've been meeting twice every month to look at what other communities are doing across the state and to work on developing some draft goals for our community. So I'd like to sort of summarize those here. Our draft goals would include Buncombe County helping to positively impact 2,800 up to 3,150 new affordable and workforce housing units by 2030. And we picked the 2030 date to work on because we feel like it's enough time that we can really set some ambitious goals and work on actually getting a lot of these, complicated projects actually constructed. So that larger goal can be broken down into several parts. First would be the development of between 1,500 and 1,850 new affordable rental units. And so affordable rental units are defined as those that qualify for residents who make 80% of area median income or less, but the average affordability of this group of apartments, we would want to be at the 60% area affordable to folks at average of 60% area median income, which is very affordable. So there'll be a range of affordability from 30% or lower up to 80%, but with an average affordability of around 60%. There would also be 400 new affordable homeownership units brought on board over this time. There would be 500 emergency home repair projects. Those are the projects we work on to help people who want to stay in their homes, addressing life safety issues in their homes so they can stay in their homes. And there would also be 400 new workforce units developed at that time, which could be a combination of rental units and home ownership units for households between 80 and 120% area median income. All right, next slide, please. So the purpose of this presentation is we wanted to consider and touch on a couple of things. One is we've been discussing the potential role that existing county-owned property could play in helping to contribute to the creation of new affordable housing. So we want to touch on that. We want to talk about at a high level, some of the investment levels that would be needed to meet the goals that we just summarized on the previous slide. We want to talk about some of the financing options to pursue those goals. And then finally review and summarize a few potential policy recommendations and budgetary recommendations to help advance these goals and strategies to help meet the goals. All right, next slide, please. All right, so this is a slide, and again, many of these are simply high-level summaries, and they are estimates. So some of these will end up being, higher or lower than what's forecasted here. These are sort of meant to be kind of preliminary ballpark types of estimates, but we've already gotten agreement from the commission to review 4 county-owned properties, 3 of which are in the downtown area, and then of course there's also the significant Ferry Road property. So this slide summarizes, what if between now and 2030 we were successful in redeveloping 3 out of those 4 properties. I mean, hopefully they all are redeveloped to great new projects. But, you know, development's never easy. We don't assume we're 100% successful at everything. So if we develop Cox Avenue, which is actually 3 separate parcels, the Valley Street property, and the Ferry Road property at 200 units, and then the big Ferry Road property at 600 units. You know, and again, I think that there's good arguments. Each of those could potentially support more, but maybe less. But if under that scenario, that would actually be property for 1,000 potential units, which is, of course, be very significant towards the goals we're talking about. Also, if you assigned a real estate value of $15,000 per new affordable unit that's built to that contributed property, which if you look at the cost of buying land in our community, most of the developments that we review, if you look at the cost of land the developer had to go through to get that property, it would be a number bigger than this number, right? So, but if you assume $15,000 of real estate value, that would be a contribution of around $15 million of real estate we would be contributing to these projects. So potentially a significant contribution. And I think the point we want to make here is that contributing funds to projects is one way to contribute, but we do have other resources that we could also use to help add towards these efforts. Our commission today in our meeting also, one of our recommendations is that as we go forward and we add staffing to community development, we'd also like to explore other publicly owned properties for their potential for possible affordable housing development as well. All right, the next slide, please. All right, so high-level investment strategies to pursue these goals. So the county is currently investing, well over $2 million as a recurring investment per year into our affordable housing programs. So if we simply maintain our current funding levels, between now and 2030, the county would invest a little over $20 million into new affordable housing development. And that's not counting the real estate, that's not counting ARPA funding, that's just our annual appropriation into our budget, right? So we're already going to invest a significant amount. But let's think about a couple of the options to grow that. One option would be to, if we increased the annual investment from the county's budget from $2.5 million to $3.8 million, and we added an annual index for inflation of 2.5%, so it grew a little bit every year, if nothing else, to keep up with increasing inflation. That would raise about $12 million of additional revenue between now and 2030. We already talked about if we contributed all the properties, under one scenario, you could potentially estimate that in the $15 million range as a real estate contribution. We've already invested about $7.5 million of our ARPA funding towards affordable housing and homelessness-related projects. If we repeat that amount in the next round of ARPA funding, then we'll have contributed about $15 million of the Recovery Act funding towards projects that will help us meet these goals. So if you add up those 3 particular tools under that specific scenario, then that would be about $42 million of additional sort of resources invested into this space, added to the $20 million that we're already going to spend. So that would be a little over $60 million. So just as one scenario for how we could grow the resources to meet these goals. Okay, the next slide, please. So I'm going to show you a couple of just simple spreadsheets, but there's a lot of numbers on here. Let me just kind of summarize what the highlights of this are. So we wanted to kind of look at some financial scenarios. As you can see on the left side of the chart, it's basically every calendar year we have between now and 2030. So we've got 7 or 8 years to go meet these goals, right? Because we're not going to meet them overnight. We have to kind of work on this and make progress every year. So this slide, the purpose is to summarize the potential costs for us to meet all of our housing goals that we've described here, except for the big goal around 1,500 plus affordable apartments, right? So we'll have some separate slides just on that because that's a bigger lift. So this chart summarizes the cost to build. You can see at the bottom line, sort of the summary line, the total, 400 new affordable homeownership units, 400 workforce units, and 400 home repair units. And so And then we look at the average cost of bringing online each of those units. So for example, on the top line under affordable home ownership units, we would need to do 50 units a year, every year to get to the 400 goal by year 2030. Looking at projects that we're accustomed to funding with like Habitat for Humanity and other projects, we're assuming we need to invest around $40,000 per unit to bring those units forward. So that would be about $2 million a year. You add that up, add inflation to that, that would be about $17 million a year to meet our home ownership goal. In the middle of the slide is the same summary for potential cost to build 50 workforce units per year, which will be less expensive because these are folks who have more income and so need less subsidy. You build 50 of those every year, we can meet our goal. That'll cost over $7 million to meet the workforce housing goal. And then in the far right is if we do 50 home repair projects per year, spending around $4,500 per unit, we would spend, over that period, we'd invest about $2 million to meet the goal for the 400 home repair system. So, and then at the bottom of the slide summarizes all this. So the total investment under this scenario would be around $27 million to meet all of these goals. Now, Buncombe County is not the only local government entity working hard on these goals. The city of Asheville is investing significantly in these goals. Dogwood Charitable Fund Trust is investing heavily in these goals. So if you assume that of these different projects in this affordable housing space, the county is contributing 50% of the public funding needed to achieve the goals, then of that $27 million community investment, the counties might be around $13.7 million. So again, this is a very kind of hypothetical financial scenario, but it's, you know, it's one way of thinking about based on what we invest in these areas now, if you run it forward, what might we need to do to meet these goals? Okay, so the next couple of slides are meant to explore just the potential cost to meet the really big new goal we have to build 1,500 plus new affordable rental units in Buncombe County. So, and as we've looked at what's being done around the state, looking at what other cities and counties are doing, part of what we have sort of started to spend more time and attention on is the potential opportunity to build more projects in Buncombe County using the low-income housing tax credit program, which is in two different tax credit programs in our country. It's all super bureaucratic. They have all these wonky names, but one of them is referred to the 9% program, the other's the 4% program. Most of what we've been doing in Buncombe County in the past has been through the 9% program. It's a very competitive process. Buncombe County really only gets one of these per year. But we do one almost every year. So this scenario kind of assumes we continue doing a 9% project every single year, and they're usually around 80 to 100 units. Because the county's not the only financial partner of those projects, we're not counting all of those 80 to 100 units as our units. We're counting 50 of them because we're just a proportional kind of investor. The city helps with those a lot as well. So this slide looks at what if we built all of these new units that we needed, up to 1,500 units, using just the 9% tax credit program and added to it new units under the 4% program. What's great about the 4% program is it's non-competitive, meaning as long as projects meet the criteria for those, then at least for the foreseeable future, we could do many, many more of them in Buncombe County every year. And so under this scenario, we'd build 50, the county would help support 50 9% units, and then 138 4% units, which require a higher level of investment at $35,000 per unit. And if we did that over between now and 2029, we'd build 1,500 units. The total community investment to do that would be about $48 million. If the county's bearing half of that, along with the city and Dogwood and others, our contribution towards that would be around $24 million. Adding to that the other goals, $13 million. So the total cost to meet all of our goals under this scenario would be around $38 million, which is, you know, a significant investment, but as you recall from the earlier slides, there's several tools in our toolbox that would project us getting north of this number. So But this would be if this is a hypothetical scenario where the county only developed new projects through a tax credit program. There are different kinds of really valuable housing developments that don't qualify for tax credits. So for that reason, we would not recommend using that strategy because there's going to be other things we want to do along the way. Next slide, the next slide, please. But just sort of to kind of illustrate kind of how, kind of the power of these different programs, this slide would contemplate what if we met our goal of 1,500 units and we developed all of the new units without using the tax credit programs, except for the 50 units we're already building every year through the 9% program. So it requires a lot more local funding to meet the 1,500 unit goal, which we'd have 400 through the tax credit program that we're already doing, and then 1,100 new units through other new developments without using tax credits. The total cost to develop all of those new units would be $182 million. The county's role in that, if half, would be $91 million. So again, we're not expecting this to be the scenario that we use, but just to illustrate from 100% tax credits to kind of zero new tax credits, the spectrum of the different investment levels required. Okay, next slide, please. Just got two more to kind of zero in on what's maybe more the realm of where we're really focused. This scenario contemplates if 80% of our new units were tax credits and 20% were non-tax credits. To basically summarize this slide, the total cost to develop 1,500 units would be $85 million. The county's cost of that would be, if half, $42 million. And then with the other $13 million of county investment to meet the other goals, it's around $56 million. Again, very ballpark estimates. So, one encouraging thing is that if we implemented the funding strategies outlined earlier, that we actually would have the level of resources to do a scenario like this. But if you run one other scenario, and this is the last slide, like this, where we do 90% of our new units as tax credits instead of 80, but spend the same level of money, $56 million, then on this slide, the scenario 4 basically shows that for the same $56 million investment from the county, instead of building 1,500 new affordable units by 2030, we could build almost 1,900. So for the same investment level, you get about almost 400 more affordable units over the next 8 years. So anyway, those are just some scenarios that we've been looking at that we wanted to share with the commission to kind of just think about different pathways forward. The next slide, please. As I said, we've been looking at what a lot of other counties and cities have been doing. And, this whole 4% tax credit program has been a very underutilized, it's been around a long time in our country, but it's been very underutilized. I think part of the reason we haven't used it more is that these projects do require investment, right? Like they typically, like the tax credits don't provide enough incentives for developers to do these projects on their own. And I think here in Buncombe County, frankly, we have not been investing enough to really make more of those kinds of very significant but complicated and larger projects really financially possible. We've done several in the last years, the Mountain Housing Project at Lee Walker Heights, Lakeshore Apartments through the ARPA funding. So we started doing a few, but part of the reason we haven't been doing more is that it does require us to sort of step up our game to get into this space. Other communities in North Carolina are really scaling up their work. This slide highlights how in Wake County alone, since 2018, so just over the last 3 or 4 years, they have built over 3,000 new, very affordable units in Wake County and through the 4% low-income housing tax credit program. So kind of an example of how really scalable this is if you focus on it. Durham County's done in the same time period, over just 3 years, over almost 1,100 units. So anyway, we have some great models to follow from other communities in the state. All right, next slide, and this is the last slide. And so these are the draft policy recommendations that we wanted to put forward for consideration. The first one, and I'd say this is the one that we're the most firm on, and we don't expect to change between now and when we come back to the commission, is to establish the goals. And so that would be The 1,500 to, and we're going to call it 1,850 new affordable units. We had 1,887. We thought that was such a weird number. We're rounding it to 1,850. So
Did you debate that?
a few minutes today, yeah, a few minutes earlier today. Good discussion. And then, and I'm sorry, I think there's actually a typo on this slide. I want to get the numbers right on this. So, and then 400 homeownership units, 500 repair units, and 400 workforce units. So that's our recommendation on numbers between now and 2030 for goals. And then these next items, I would say more at this point, these are very draft, and we're just kind of saying more think about these potential scenarios, not to recommend any specific funding level, but that we can consider potential increases in our annual funding in the budget, that we consider making significant new investments from our ARPA funding in the next round that we go through. If we repeat the $7.5 million, again, we'd be at $15 million there. And that, we move forward on the county-owned land, which I think was already something the wheels are in motion on that. The other policy recommendation we want to speak to is really considering supporting the development of an affordable housing bond initiative, which the voters would have to be approved by voters. So there's some due diligence going on that idea now, but I think the more we've researched this, even though we do have other strategies that are within our control, we feel like the passage of a bond, if approved by voters, would best position our community for success in meeting these goals. So we want to really kind of we think we should strongly encourage that if it appears the voters would be interested in supporting it too. And then the last thing would be, looking at these goals, we do think that while we should not exclude projects that aren't part of the low-income housing tax credit program, that we should embrace it as sort of a central key strategy to meeting these goals in a way that's actually financially realistic for our community. So like the scenario 4 option, which could get us potentially up to close to 1,900 units within this budget, we think is an attractive scenario to seriously consider. So, all right. So that's the last slide. Thank you all for listening to this. And Parker and Amanda, I'd just ask if y'all have any comments you'd like to share as well.
I guess I'd just take a moment to point out another statistic now that you've digested all those numbers so easily. Dogwood Health Trust recently commissioned a new housing study with Bowen Research, who's done a couple of local housing reports for us of Dogwood's, I think it's 18 counties in their region. And it showed that our local problems gotten worse over the last 10 years. And there's a couple figures in there that stood out to me. One is that our county has about 15,000 multifamily rental units total in existence. And our gap for 80% AMI and lower, the need that we have is around 4,300 units. And it's one of the top 4 worst counties in that 18 county region. And I don't say that to be discouraging or pessimistic in reflection to that presentation and those goals, but rather to say that if we don't do more, the hole will get larger and the problem will worsen. So I'm really excited and optimistic about those goals. We've shown through just kind of research and just spending so much time on this that there are multiple pathways to achieving these goals, and there are other tools that have emerged along the way that that should make us feel better and optimistic about it, that we should harness as well. So.
Yeah, I'm been very cautiously optimistic as we head through this process, and I've continued to say we've set very lofty goals, and I think we've done a lot of work to pave the way to start to reach those goals. I think it's interesting tonight that we heard from Helpmate and the Domestic Violence Task Force, and to me it really brought home the need to work on these goals, because right now as it is with the affordable housing issues that we have in our community, we are preventing people from leaving really violent situations, and it really puts some of that in perspective with the timing of that tonight. So makes it very serious. Of course, we have another recommendation coming forward for another project this evening, which makes all of this even more exciting.
But I say all that to say is that it gives us the opportunity to look at all kinds of people need all kinds of different housing. And this is where I think we're headed as we look at our goals, that we're looking really, really wide at the need. I do have to say, I have been the one that has been really excited about the 80 to 120% AMI housing. And right now, we're using the phrase workforce housing. That's what it's called. We know that that verbiage is not the best, and we're working to come up with another terminology for that. But I also don't want us to get in our own way of using terminology as a way to not move forward on really exciting goals. When we talk about 80 to 120, that's our teachers. That's our county and city employees. That's our paramedics. That's our folks picking up our garbage, keeping our community clean. So we don't want to leave those folks behind either. So really excited about where this is headed, and look forward to working with the rest of you all to make these goals a reality for Buncombe County.
I would also like to just acknowledge the great work the staff have been doing on this. They have been really doing great research to help us see like what's working in other communities around the state, and opportunities to scale up the already great work that's happening here. So Sybil Tate and Matt Cable in particular, but everybody else from the county staff have been helping to explore the possibilities and do the research. We really appreciate you, as well as all the different partner organizations in the community that have been weighing in and sharing ideas and have a lot of vision. We have a lot of really talented people who work in this space that we're helping to contribute to this. So, Commissioners, any other questions at this time?
This is really substantive, so a lot of great stuff to digest, but at a high level, I think really exciting to see us kind of rounding the bend into a long-term aggressive strategy on housing. I had one question just as we're thinking in the next couple of weeks. Under the different scenarios, it sort of contemplates a fairly high level of investment from municipal partners and potentially philanthropic partners. I wonder if you all have thoughts about whether it seems like we could enter into long-term partnerships with any of these entities, so there would be a commitment on the table, or whether it seems like, as with many other things, it's often more on a project-by-project basis, and you kind of don't know necessarily going into a given year which funding collaboratives will come to fruition. So you don't have to answer that if you're not ready, but that's something that I was just sort of thinking about as I looked at the different scenarios.
I think that's a fantastic idea and would be more predictable for developers if they can kind of expect certain loan terms or partnerships with multiple agencies. I think that's fantastic.
I agree, and they're significant. I mean, traditionally, the city's been the largest investor in this space. Even though they're a smaller governmental unit than the county, they've invested more than we have. They did a bond, $25 million, and now Dogwood's investing $10 million a year. Of course, that's region-wide, not just Buncombe County, but we are going into this with, really significant partners. So I think developing those multi-year plans is really exciting, and I suspect they'll be happy to figure out good strategies for long-term collaboration.
Now, as we do this, which is a good plan, I like, but let's be transparent with the average taxpayer. One question they're going to ask is, how much is this going to cost us? And I think we need to make sure we point that out, and especially if we go out for a bond issue, which makes sense, but we got to sell it too. So let's make sure. I like what we're doing, but let's make sure that we show, because if we don't do this, we're losing people now because of housing in the community. But let's be salesmen too as we go forward and make sure that everybody understands, what it'll cost.
Absolutely.
I appreciate all the work on this, and definitely the 4%, looking at that and being able to really maximize our investment more and being able to see those numbers. So I look forward to digging into all of that more closely. One question I had when we're thinking about strategies, and I know, this is long-term goals and everything, which is great. And in the short term, it'd be really interesting to know how many apartments are coming online. I think there's been about 1,000 approved since November of just this past November. And so with that, I think about vouchers, and we know that vouchers are underutilized. And so I do wonder, have y'all been having a conversation about that and how we could better be, encouraging that use to really get people into housing?
Yeah, it's come up the last 2 meetings, and it's really one of the cheapest ways to house people. If we were doing this from scratch as a government, that's how we would do it, use existing housing stock and help people with vouchers. We've talked about making a voucher goal, but it's something we're, absolutely talking about.
Because from what I've heard, it is definitely a cost-effective way, right, to
Yeah.
really try to move the needle on that. So I'd just be interested in how we could be looking at that and utilizing that as well.
I think our like a working assumption is that all of the new, like what we're calling the affordable rental units, would all be voucher eligible, right? Or there actually may be some nuances to that, like you have to make 50% or less AMI to be voucher eligible. So some of the like 50 to 80%, priced wouldn't technically be eligible. But we want to work with developers who are very supportive of accepting vouchers for the apartments that, qualify for it. And then there's some other strategies too for maybe how we can expand like the network of private landlords in the community who might be interested in participating in it if they knew more about it. And there's some interesting, like the city's working with Thrive on an interesting pilot project around encouraging landlords to start participating too. And we're interested in maybe, seeing if that might make sense to do a pilot project on more of a countywide basis.
That sounds positive, and I guess I was just thinking about, I see several apartments that are getting ready to come online as I drive in to work, and so I was just thinking about that today when I see all those and think, okay, what about, is there some way to encourage them, do some education? I don't know, have we done any can we do any outreach to make them aware of the voucher program and encourage some use of that? Because in that's housing that is, they're ready to start renting.
Yep.
The rental signs are up.
If we could get more folks like that to join in, it would make a huge difference. So it's a really interesting idea that is promising and worth exploring more for sure. All right, commissioners, thank you all for letting us take some time on this evening. We plan to do some more work on this, and we're going to be back with a follow-up discussion and a vote on at least some of the goals that we feel like are most ready to be formally approved in the not-too-distant future. All right, commissioners, moving on. The next item on our agenda is County Manager's Report.
Thank you, Commissioners. I have 2 quick items. In the past few weeks, we have been buying and handing out more protective masks, and we have exceeded what we have on hand so far. So the question for you tonight, and Bernie, we talked about this, do we want to extend that? Do we want to continue purchasing the KN95 mask to hand out to the citizens? Or right now, we give this type of mask, the disposable mask that I'm wearing. That's what we hand out at government buildings. But the question has come up, do we want to replace these masks with more of the KN95s in all of our government buildings? So I just want to put that to the board to see if you want to upgrade the masks that we're currently giving out at our buildings.
And I guess I would just add, commissioners, for sort of thinking about that question. We started this off as sort of a bridge between, where we were and the federal government doing more to make masks available for folks. And we know now there's through the website, people can order masks. And so I guess the question is, I think that was great, but do we want to continue to do that, to make sort of another option available for folks who, even though if you do go online and order it, it is super easy. Yeah. But not everybody has the instinct to do that, or some folks don't have the technology, or maybe they're just not in the habit of going online and ordering things. So having them at libraries or other public places, is that something that we would be interested in investing more of our funding to continue to make available for some period of time?
I'm going to ask a question before I hammer home how supportive I am of the idea. Avril, you mentioned in an email, I think I'm recalling this is the right context, of a county stockpile of masks that we were using initially. Is it the same masks we're talking about, and that's now depleted? And
we would need to begin purchasing, and we also have to replace our stockpile as PPE for our paramedics.
Okay.
We need to replace that, but that stockpile is gone, and we would now be purchasing from the market to give out to residents.
So we need to replenish the stockpile no matter what, but you're saying above and beyond that to give out to
Yes.
the,
If that's the practice you guys want to continue doing, yes.
yeah. I guess, other than just saying I think it's a great idea and people should expect things from government in crisis and things for free and things at their fingertips. And so I like this idea. I do recall early on the pandemic reading about, research and just strategies to get people to wear masks at all, to encourage them to adopt the practice. And one of the most clearly and most often cited ways to do that was to get them physically in front of people and easily accessible to people. So that's why I support it above all else.
I also support it.
And so just to clarify, are we talking about using ARPA funds for this, or is that the recommendation?
How much will they cost?
They come in bundles of 15,000, and on the low end, it's about 12,000, 13,000 per bundle, and the high end, it's about 20,000. So
How many would we order?
I would recommend at least 30,000 if you're going to start handing them out across the county. We ordered 10,000 before, and they were gone within 2 days of opening. So at least 30,000 will be my minimum order. If you go on the low end, it'd be $26,000 for that low end.
Would I be in order to make a motion that we authorize the staff to purchase 30,000 masks?
Second.
There's a motion and second? Yep.
So is it going to be an ongoing program? Because 30 is our first order, but if you want to keep this up until our numbers are back, so I would rather you say instead of a fixed amount, that you would tell me we keep it until we get back to 5% positivity, or what is that window you're looking at?
I'll check.
I hear you, but, I don't think there may need to be some budget for this, right? Because, we're a big county. It could theoretically be like, in almost infinite numbers. So, why don't we, I guess, I don't know, I think I support the recommendation, but with the idea that maybe we just we monitor this, see how quickly those are depleted. I'm open to doing more, for sure. I don't think it needs to be limited to that number, but I don't want us to, I would like to have some upper limits on this, because there's going to be other things we want to do with the funding we've approved for COVID relief beyond, potentially just this item, right? So,
I think 30 is an initial order,
Mhm.
but it's going to go quickly, in my opinion. So if
Do you
you
think it would go before our next meeting in February?
Thank you for that question. So, let us do the 30 to order now, because the mask conversation is on the agenda for the 15th, and then we'd be looking at positivity and having that conversation then. So we will come back on the 15th and have a final conversation on that. Thank you for that.
Commissioner Whitesides, or, we could, if the staff are telling us, like that amount's going to predictably go very quickly, plus we need to stockpile more for our own internal use. Perhaps we should do an initial amount of more, just so that they're not immediately gone, but we also know, here's the amount we're putting in at this time before we discuss further.
What would
Let's go with
90,000
$50,000,
do?
$50,000.
I'm sorry, what? Say that again,
We
Avril.
can start at $50,000 and let us buy, our stockpile is not in this number. That
Mhm.
would at least place the first order for 30,000, and then if we need to do that before the 15th, we have the ability to move forward.
Okay.
So $50,000,
And this is coming from the contingency I already have. I'm not asking for more of the 22 million. This is the
Right.
$1 million contingency that we already have.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Okay, I'm fine.
You want to make a motion to accept that
Yeah.
staff recommendation?
You want to add it to the agenda, I would suggest, because we're in county manager's report, right? It should be under old business.
Thank you. Yes, if you're gonna make a motion and vote, it would be under old business. So you have to add that to the agenda, is what you're saying.
I agree. Can we add it to under old business by consensus?
Yes.
Does anyone object? Okay. Which we're going to come to in like, as soon as we stop this conversation, we're going to be in old business, so it'll take like 5 seconds of transition. So, but thank you for the procedural
Yeah.
But we'll come
Suggestion.
back to that vote. I have one more
Okay.
item I want to
Yep.
talk about in manager's report, and I'll ask Philip Harden. So as Philip is coming, you recall that in last year, you gave us the ability to start a homeowners grant program, and we told you we'll come back at some point and just give you an update on the status of how that went. So Philip is going to give you that update right now.
The homeowner grant presentation? No, that was for the NC Pro. I don't see it on here. I sent it to him. Wanted to, good evening, Commissioners.
Evening.
Wanted to give you a wrap-up of the homeowner grant program, and it was nice to hear in public comment such nice things about my staff. They did a great job with this program, and I promise I did not pay that gentleman to come talk about the homeowner grant program. But in essence, we took almost 2,000 applications. We approved a little over 1,200 of those, and we denied about 726 of them. So this is a little bit of an analysis of the denials. 36% of those denials, people were already enrolled in the elderly disabled program, veterans program, and there's one other one. 26% of those denials were failure to provide information. Most of them were actually not completing the interview. We made multiple attempts to contact individuals. We mailed them letters to contact us, and we eventually denied those applications. But if they came back in and touched base with us again, we reopened. So 19% were over income, 4% withdrew, and most of those were people who, as they went through the process, they came to the conclusion that they probably weren't going to be eligible. 2% were personal property. They didn't necessarily own real property. A lot of that was probably like mobile homes. owned less than 5 years were 2%. The 11% other were, we had quite a few applications from people who did not necessarily live in Buncombe County. They lived in surrounding counties. So there's a hodgepodge in that.
So, you know, I'll just admit, this is something I didn't know. I didn't recognize that because mobile homes were considered personal property, that they wouldn't be eligible for this program. So it may have been something I just missed earlier, but and the distinction makes sense in the context, but anyway, it's just something I wasn't aware of, so.
Not all mobile homes are considered, if they're attached to the land, permanently attached.
Right, well, that's a good point.
If
So
they're
some,
still on there.
so some of them would have not been considered personal property, but obviously folks are paying taxes on it regardless of the classification. So anyway, I just appreciate you making that distinction because I think it's a nuance that I was not aware of before.
And to your point, Commissioner Newman, we approve, if they own the property and the mobile home and it all was together, then we approve them for a homeowner grant. These
Even
were
if it's
people
considered
who-
personal property, if they own the land, it would qualify.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Because they would be paying they'd be paying taxes on all of that.
Correct. It's bundled all
Yeah,
together.
right, okay.
This is kind of the spending of the program. And you'll notice we approved 453 grants for people who lived in Asheville, 52 for Woodfin, and 758 for people who just lived in the county. We spent $90,600 of the $150,000 for the city of Asheville's allocation, $10,400 for Woodfin's allocation, and then for the county, the total portion that we spent for county residents was $227,000. So if you look at the bottom of the total county portion, the total county portion altogether with the Woodfin and the Asheville dollars added to it was $378,900. And the total paid out for the homeowner grant was $479,900. Inquiries by race, 7% black, 62% white. We had 29%, it was not a requirement to report, so 29% did not, preferred not to report. Just a little less than 0.5% were Hispanic or Latino, and then 0.3% were more than 2 races. Inquiries by zip code, and the map by and far, 28806 was the largest where we got inquiries from. It was about 19%. 28801 and 03 were at 12%, and Candler zip code was about 10%, and it went down from there. Successes. It was a new county program. We turned it around in a very quick time frame. Feel like the program was very successful. We learned a lot this year, and we'll talk about some options for coming years if commissioners decide to run the program again. We were able to meet all the established deadlines. We had to have all the payments to tax by the end of the year, and we were able to accomplish that. We provided assistance to over 1,200 families or individuals. We did a really good job, county communications, especially with outreach. We put a flyer in all the tax bills, and we got a lot of inquiries based on that flyer. And then IT did a really good job in getting us up and running in a period of about a month, which was, that was quite a push for them. So, recommendations. Possibly, if we run the program again next year, we would like to consider a liquid resource limit, and liquid resources would be such as things that you can convert to cash within, say, 5 days. Things like cash on hand, checking accounts, savings accounts, those kinds of things. It wouldn't include like property or stocks and bonds or anything like that. We asked the question about resources this year. It was not an eligibility factor. So we have some data around that to where people stood as far as liquid resources go. We would like to begin accepting applications earlier or close earlier. We were pushed for time, and I put, this is what was paid out of that $479,000. $291,000 went to property tax, and $188,000 went to insurance or mortgage. And a lot of the payments that were made to something other than property tax, 40% of the property in the county has a mortgage attached to it. And as we got later in the year, escrows in those mortgages paid the property taxes. So we were, at times, the property tax had already been paid by the time we approved the application. And then we want to make some minor tweaks to the policy. Multiple property owner, people who own multiple properties, people who own mobile homes, multiple incomes, but we can do that internally and bring that back to the commissioners. Then how to deal with mobile homes and property that is not owned by the homeowner. That goes back to your question. Want to make sure that we spell that out this coming year. So I think that's it. Questions?
Can you speak more to your recommendation about the liquid resource and why you're recommending that? What was it you saw that made you make that recommendation?
I'll give you a quick breakdown, because like I said, we did ask the questions. It wasn't part of the eligibility. What we saw was that about 19% of the people that we asked the question did not want to respond to the question. We had about 19% of the people that we approved that had liquid resources between $10,000 and $50,000. And then we had about 12% of the approvals that had liquid resources above $50,000. It was not an eligibility criteria, so as long as they were income eligible.
Thank you for looking into that data and bringing that to us. I appreciate it.
Any other questions, commissioners?
Just sort of, thank you, this is great. It would be great to sort of close the loop on the analysis around this and look at the rates of what we see down the road a little bit at the end of the collection period, and in terms of, you know, the goals of avoiding people having to go into forbearance and things like that related to unpaid taxes. So I think just it's kind of slotting this into that bigger puzzle piece of what's happening as a result of people getting assistance with paying property taxes, aside from the obvious relief they're experiencing at the individual level.
One other question, and if there's a short answer now, I'd be happy to hear it, or if it's something to think about. There's a lot of things I like about this. I'm wondering if it's possible to kind of calculate how much staff time went into this too, because I can tell it's a lot, and I think it's to be commended how much great work people did. But this is a new idea. It's something we tried out. I think as we do this, we do have to evaluate, okay, we're giving this much benefit to the community, but how much work goes into providing that level of benefit? And maybe there's, as we evaluate for the future, is this a good, you know, an effective way for us to spend all of our resources? Or maybe there's ways to make it more efficient, you know, in subsequent rounds, things like that. But do you have any short answer to that, or is that something, as we continue to think about it, could be looked at?
I think we can accomplish that. The good thing about our staff, they do day sheets. meaning that they account for every minute of every day that they work and write it down.
Yep.
So that is something that we could, can bring that information to the commission.
Well, as we think about it, I'd appreciate that, just to understand the level of staff resources that went into it last year, to think about that for the future, too. Any other questions? All right, thank you, Philip. Appreciate you and your team. All right. Commissioners, let's go to old business and consider appropriating funds for 50,000 masks.
And Mr. Chairman,
Just
I'm sorry, as a procedural matter,
Oh, yeah.
then you'd have to have unanimous vote to add it to the
Okay.
agenda. So now that would be
Without,
appropriate first.
is there any objection to adding this to the agenda? Or is there a motion to add it to the agenda? Right, thank you.
add this as an agenda item under old business.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thank you, Mr. Frew. All right, so we have consideration of using some Recovery Act funds from the already approved COVID response for additional masks. And Avril, your recommendation was to consider not $50,000, but acquisition of 50,000 masks at this time. Is that correct?
$50,000 from the contingency fund.
$50,000. Okay, thank you. All right, there's a motion and second to appropriate an additional $50,000 for the acquisition of high-quality masks for distribution to the public.
Brownie, 50,000, a lot of money that we, could go other places, and everyone knows where I stand on the mask, and we don't know how much longer we're going to be doing this. So I did, to get it on the agenda, I voted to put it on here, and I know about where I stand whenever I do that. So instead of prolonging it 2 weeks, I wanted yes, but I'll have to vote against this because I just think I've heard from fire department of the problems they've had of giving these out and running out, and then their staff working, trying to explain why they don't have these masks. And so in that, I'm not going to support this. That's $50,000. There's a lot of things this county needs, and we've had different masks over time, but I just, 50,000, a lot of money.
I appreciate your willingness to put it on the agenda. Avril?
Yes, sir. So to your point, Commissioner, about the fire departments, in this case, we would not be using that method again. It would be in county buildings. So if you come to this building, instead of getting one of these masks, you have a higher quality mask. If you go to any of the libraries or courthouses or social services departments, so in all of our public spaces, this is where we will have the mask. So we would not have a distribution or packaging of distribution, but you can come to any county facility, and that would be the mask that you can pick up versus a mask like what we're wearing tonight.
Okay, yeah, and I didn't know that, but I knew that I'd heard some of the fire departments said they did not want to get back in the program anyway because of all the harassment they got off of it.
Understood. All right, all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
All right. Thank you, Commissioners. We move on to new business. First item is a budget amendment for NC Pro Emergency Rental Assistance Grant. And I believe John Hudson and Philip Harden are going to help us out with this. Thank you for being here.
Good evening, Commissioners. The first budget amendment tonight is additional funding in the amount of $2,285,273 for emergency rental assistance. This comes from the state's allocation of the first emergency rental assistance grant. It's to be used following the same guidelines as the others on rent and utility payments. We have a short presentation following this amendment to tell you the progress of how we've delivered those funds. So this also supports administrative budget that would continue to support 3 caseworkers and 2 temporary grant positions for another 3.7 months to distribute this portion of the funding. And those staff are currently already hired. So after the distribution of the ERA 1, we will begin distributing these funds.
Motion to approve the budget amendment.
Second.
Okay, so were we going to do the presentation? Or
Yes.
before, do you want to hear the presentation and then vote, or vote now?
I thought that he said that he was going to do the presentation afterwards, but that's fine.
Okay. Your choice.
We can wait.
Okay, let's go ahead and just do the presentation, then we'll vote.
Okay. Talk a little bit about emergency housing assistance. Not calling it real assistance because we also are doing mortgages through the CDBG money. So as you can see, we got a direct allocation from U.S. Treasury of about $7.1 million in what we call ERA 1, and we've expended those dollars. They're gone. And the budget amendment is for the ERA 1 state allocation. The state set aside money for the 13 counties that got direct allocations from U.S. Treasury, and that's where these dollars are coming from. They set aside some dollars out of over and above what they use to run the NC HOPE program for. And once again, we only have until September 30th of this year to spend those dollars. And then we have ERA 2, and the service allocation of those dollars is about $5.3 million. And we've already expended $1.2 million of those ERA 2 dollars. My understanding is there's actually money set aside at the state of ERA 2 that we can request once those dollars are expended also. And the nice thing about the ERA 2 is we have until September of 2025 to expend those dollars. And then we're running CDBG, the Community Development Block Grant, and we've expended $166,000 on mortgages with those dollars so far. It was nice to see that the state NC Housing Finance Agency has opened up mortgage assistance at state level, because remember, we cannot help people inside the city limits of Asheville with the CDBG dollars, so we can make a referral to NC Housing Finance. ERA 1 is up to 12 months worth of assistance. ERA 2 is up to 18 months worth of assistance. And CDBG is 6 months of assistance. And I will say, because we can go back to March of 2020, we actually have individuals and families that have used the 18 months worth of assistance already. Inquiries by zip code, 28806 by far, 22%. 01, 12, 03, 13, Arden, 13%. And then inquiries by race, 32% black, 48% white. And I'd like to give you approvals. It's about the same when I look at it. The numbers are very, very similar. 48% white, 9% did not want to report, 3% Hispanic or Latino. I think that's it. Questions?
I don't see any at this time, so thank you so much for the additional details. All right, we've got a motion and second on the budget amendment. Any further questions? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Next up is a consideration of a budget amendment for additional funding for low-income energy assistance.
Yes, we've received funding from the state for the Low-Income Energy Assistance Program. This is a seasonal program that provides for vendor payments to help eligible households pay their heating bills. The state is providing funding from 2 different sources to the county for a total of $1,887,432, and all of these funds will be distributed through Eblin Charities. There's one portion, an allocation of $217,512 in regular federal funding that will be used for eligible households to pay their heating bills. Then there is also $1,669,920, which is coming from the state's American Rescue Plan Act funds for an automatically authorized payment for households with children 0 to 10 years old that are receiving FNS and received LIHEAP last fiscal year. So these are automatically authorized payments that will be generated based on the household's primary heating source.
All right, thank you. Any questions, or is there a motion?
Motion to
The
approve.
budget amendment.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Can I make just one comment here?
Sure.
So I'm thinking about this and thinking about the survey that we had earlier and kind of the feedback we got from the community. And it makes me wonder, like with this program, do people, because Eblin is the one who's distributing this, right? And they've been doing that for us for a long time. But I wonder, do the folks that are getting that, do they realize that that's actually partly coming through the county government is because of what we're doing, that they're getting that? Because I do just think about that as far as that kind of awareness in the community of what all we do.
Good question. All right. We have another budget amendment. Consideration of a budget amendment for additional education appropriations related to the FY 2022 state budget.
So when we passed the FY22 budget, we agreed to revisit the salary needs of the schools upon the passage of the state budget. So Governor Cooper signed the budget on November 18th, and the schools and Buncombe County Schools provided a refined request in January in order to meet the salaries for local employees. They provided a request to us of an additional $1,641,878 to meet those salary needs. At this time, they also requested $733,517 for a property insurance increase and utility rate increases. County manager is recommending that only the salary request as agreed upon be taken at this time. Through our funding formula, Buncombe County will receive that $1,641,878, and Asheville City Schools will receive $317,637. We did recently receive from Asheville City Schools their request for their salary needs related to the budget. They did request $964,275. Due to our funding formula, we're unable to accommodate that much money without changing the entire funding.
All right, thanks, John. Are there any questions, or is there a motion?
I move to approve the budget amendment for the salaries.
Second.
All right, there's a motion and second to approve the budget amendment for the salary increases for the Asheville City Schools and the Buncombe County Schools as recommended by the staff in the staff report. Any further questions or discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you, John. All right, the next item on the agenda is discussion about potential additional allocations of National Recovery Act funding. And as we've discussed earlier, the county has made some significant investments in affordable housing needs in the community from the first over $25 million of funding that we received. And so there's a recommendation for additional funding for the Haywood Street project, another affordable housing project, and I'm going to ask Commissioners Sloan and Edwards to share some additional information about the project and proposal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And I guess, Max, if you could pull up the 3 slides. There we go. So yeah, I'll just go over these first 2 and hand it over to Commissioner Edwards to take us home with the ending here. First, to orient everyone with this map, we're looking at the 2 parcels, and then in the top left of the screen, the northwest corner, 0.85 acres. It's it's Hayward Street and Hilliard. Is that right? I'm looking for nods from the audience. Okay, yes. And it's walking distance to much of downtown. The proposal is for 45 apartment units, ranging from 30% to 80% area median income. And the project will accept vouchers, helping reduce that gap. I think Commissioner Wells, I think that the gap right now is it's a couple hundred vouchers out there that aren't being used, that we need to find places for people to use them. Other funding partners include the City of Asheville, who's committed to the project, and I just received word before the meeting here that Dogwood Trust is also committed to $2 million to this project. I'll just state my own personal views. My favorite part about the project is that it's new affordable housing, where there isn't any. It's a vacant piece of land. And my second favorite part about the project is that we have a largely underdeveloped downtown, I would argue, with a lot of surface parking and vacant lots and one-story buildings and vacant lots like these. And it's a great opportunity for infill development in an important center of our county. Next slide.
Max getting a workout tonight.
Yeah, thank you. And this slide's just to illustrate what we've done so far in terms of ARPA funding for affordable housing. I think something that we can, that this board can be proud of and hang our hat on as something we're doing to combat the crisis. The Days Inn project with Homeward Bound, 85 permanent supportive housing units. Lakeshore Drive, which is mountain housing opportunities. Down in Arden, 120 affordable apartments. Habitat for Humanity, both in West Asheville and in Arden. And then one of the cheapest forms of affordable housing is keeping people in their current homes through a county-led emergency repair application that we funded a couple months ago. So that's $7.5 million to date. And so this application is for additional funding for this project. And I'll hand it over to Amanda to finish this out.
Thanks, Commissioner Sloan. The recommendation from the members of the Affordable Housing Subcommittee this evening is we are recommending an investment of $749,000 of ARPA funding for construction of this particular project. We are requesting and recommending that these funds be allocated as a grant, which reduces the longer-term administrative burden and harmonizes with the project's other funding sources that we've been fully made aware of this evening. We are also recommending that further due diligence be completed prior to final award of the funding to assure that the project can be successfully constructed and operated as intended. No county funds should be allocated until the project has been de-risked and is fully shovel-ready. We also request for County Manager Pender to work with staff to draft a contract consistent with this direction. And I will just add that I'm really pleased that the subcommittee is bringing this forward to each of you for approval this evening. I've personally been very excited about this project from the moment I read the application. It is permanently, deeply affordable housing, meeting a true need in our community, and I hope that we will approve this funding this evening for Haywood Street.
Thank you.
All right, would y'all like to make a motion? Is there a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve this ARPA application for the Haywood Street 45-unit apartment complex.
I second.
Okay, with the recommended investment of $749,000 in the form of a grant. Great. All right, there's a motion and a second. Commissioners, questions or discussion?
Just a quick note that we'll be casting a vote yes, and I'm very excited too. I think this is such an important project in our community, not just because of the affordable housing it brings online, but because of the way in which it's doing it with such intention around thinking about community and how we build community. So very excited that we have an opportunity to vote on this, and thanks to all involved.
And I will be supporting it, and this is hopefully the start of many permanently affordable projects. You know, I just hate the projects that, well, I don't hate them, we need them, but when you put a 15-year limit on housing, that's not a long time, but permanently affordable is what we need.
All right, thank you, Commissioners. I'll just add, I really appreciate the team from Haywood Street. We had a lot of questions and discussion around the project, so Reverend Combs and Ward Griffin, who are here tonight, thank you for fielding all the questions from staff and commissioners. And thanks for bringing forward this project. So, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Look forward to working with you all as the project moves forward. So thanks for being here tonight. All right. Commissioners, those are all the items in our new business. We do have a couple of board appointments. Let's look at those. Under MSD, we have one reappointment. I'll make a motion to reappoint Nate Pennington.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, under the Jury Commission, we have a recommendation for one appointment for Keith Thompson.
Move to approve.
Do we have to wait on the application?
Sorry,
or
just
can
as
we
a
go
point of
Yeah,
process.
okay.
Or do we need to wait to receive the application before we can vote?
We have received the application. It just wasn't received by the time I printed this out, so.
Okay. I'm comfortable voting. Is anybody uncomfortable voting at this time?
No.
Okay, all right, there's a motion and second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Under the Juvenile Crime Prevention Council Advisory Board, one appointment, and the recommendation is for Jennifer Clow.
I make a motion to appoint Ginger Clow to JCPC.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Great.
Chairman Newman,
Yes, sir.
if I may, I have a couple items under board appointments that I would like to bring to your attention. The last meeting was canceled, and also we had a special meeting to interview for Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee. We had 3 applicants at the time. We did extend the advertisement for that, so we received an additional application. Just want to make sure that we're okay with interviewing for the next meeting on February the 15th. Is that works for the commissioner's schedule?
Sounds good to me. Does anyone have any objections to that?
Um,
Sounds good.
Any time requirements? Anybody have anything before, I guess, 12 o'clock or during that time?
We will have affordable housing at 1. So if we could do it at noon or so, that should work. We've got how many, 4 or 3?
We have 4, and I'm gonna go ahead and jump to the next item too. We have some interviews that we will need to do for the City of Asheville Community Reparations Commission. It's kind of time sensitive. I don't know if we want to do those then, or we can schedule another day. But so just wanted to see how we wanted to work that. And I'll give more information on that. If you are ready for that information, I can call Rachel Eadings. She has some update on that actual commission whenever you're ready.
And the applications have closed, so the applicant list is ready to be reviewed.
It is.
Okay. How many do we have?
As far as non-city of Asheville residents, we have, put on my glasses, we have 6. There are 24 total, and the city of Asheville will pick, out of that 24, will pick 5. And the remainder will be eligible if the county chooses to use those remaining applications. But we only have 5 that are not
City
of,
residents? Yeah.
6, excuse me, 6 that are not city of Asheville.
Well, how time sensitive is it? Should we let the city go ahead and make their appointments and then we can look at the entire pool to consider from? Or tell us about how time sensitive our decision-making process is.
And they are planning to make their selection on February the 8th. And then we will have the remainder of the applicants. So.
Okay. And then, is there a specific deadline for when it's hoped that the commission will have our appointments made?
They wanted it to be seated by the beginning of March.
Okay.
So I'll call Rachel Edens and she can
Sure.
provide some more
Sure,
information.
thanks.
So, yes, I think that Lamar kind of hit the overview. I was going to give kind of a top-level one, but, given that we are a little bit pressed for time, as you already asked, we have received all of the applications. We have all of them in hand. The city of Asheville will review and make their selections. And then we will have the opportunity, as Lamar said, to choose from the remainder, as well as the 6 applications that are non-city of Asheville. And I'm not sure if I heard what the last question was.
Oh, just, when do we need to make our, what's the deadline for us making our decisions on this? Would it be okay if, for example, we made the actual final decisions at our meeting on March 1st? Or do we need to make it, we don't need to make it at our next meeting, do we? Or is March 1st okay? Because, we could do either, but March 1st there's more meetings in between there that would make this a little bit easier.
And it is my understanding that the city will do their reviews and interviews on the 14th and 15th. Lamar, is that a discrepancy? Did I miss that? And that the goal for the county is to do them on the 21st and 22nd. So it depends on how you would like to conduct the interviews. You can do all of them at once. You can split them in half. That's something that I know that Lamar was going to send you out additional information on. To aid with the process, they have provided us with a scorecard that you can use or not choose. You can use your own metrics, but to aid in pushing the project further, that is something that we have. So we are the hope is to get it done sooner rather than later. However, it really does depend on your schedule, but the goal is the 21st and 22nd.
To do the interviews or to make the decisions?
To do the interviews.
Okay.
I believe they want them seated and starting by March the 8th, so you can do this on your March 1st meeting and still have the numbers ready. Is that, I believe, March 8th, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So
Thank you, Avril.
that sounds good. So we could shoot for, we could make a decision on who to interview on Tuesday the 15th, our next meeting. And then we could do the interviews. So there's a suggestion that we do them like a special interview meeting. Because it does, I think we'll have enough that doing them on the day of our commission meeting, it'll be too many interviews to fit in with all of our regular meetings. So does holding a special meeting on the 21st or 22nd not work for anybody?
So the 22nd, yes, on the 22nd.
Oh, that's right, the 22nd is the emergency management training, so
Yeah, the 24th.
what about the 21st, Monday the 21st?
Bronny, I believe you have an appointment on the 21st. It might not be on your calendar.
It is President's Day. Is that a county holiday?
No,
It's not, okay.
it's not. But I believe you're meeting with the gentleman from the coast, Keith Walker, on the 21st, that Monday.
I think that was scheduled for, unless it moved, I thought it was for a different day. I thought it was like Thursday or Friday.
Let me ask a question while we're thinking about this. If we only have 6 applicants from within the county, is there do we have the option to extend to try to find other applicants from the county so that we're not taking what's left over from the city's process?
At this point, we have closed the application process. We had to extend it further past the original December deadline because we were having trouble recruiting individuals to apply. So at present, these are the numbers that we have. So I realize that is a smaller pool, especially if we wanted to only look at those for 5 seats, that there's only 6.
Yeah.
But we can look at the applicants from, who live within the city too, but since the city can only pick those, they're sort of getting the first
That's
first
correct.
round of decisions on that.
So I will say, just to the idea of them being leftovers, the caliber of the applications is quite good. So they
Okay.
have a larger pool than they can choose from. So I want to be clear that there will still be very good applicants in that we have access to them. I've reviewed them. I know that Lamar has seen them as well. So it wouldn't be so much as not having the same experience or background or qualifications. It's just that they have more good candidates than they have spaces for.
I appreciate that clarification. It certainly felt like we were being tasked with picking from what was remaining. Thank you.
I understand.
Why don't we tentatively say the 21st? I'll check on this potential meeting I have that day, and I may need to do a workaround on that, but it shouldn't be a long meeting, I don't think so. Let's plan on the 21st, and we'll confirm the time on the 21st. And then we can, but I would encourage everyone to come to the meeting on the 15th, read the applications, because we'll need to narrow it down at our meeting on the 15th to do the interviews on the 21st. So be thinking about that, and 'cause it sounds like there's a lot of good applicants and we need to narrow it down to how many again?
5.
Ultimately, 5 appointments. Okay, great.
So I will say that I just want to put out there, given that it sounds like there may be potential conflict for both those dates. If that is the case, if you please let me know, and I will go back to the city and see if there's any flexibility there.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Very good. Lamar, anything else we need to know?
No, that's all I have.
All right. Got a couple of announcements. On February 15th at 3 p.m., the commissioners will hold their briefing meeting at 200 College Street, room 326 in downtown Asheville. On February 15th at 5 p.m., the commissioners will hold their regular meeting at 200 College Street, room 326 in downtown Asheville. We do have a need for a closed session. Michael Frew, would you tell us the purpose?
Yes, sir. We'd ask to go into closed session pursuant to General Statute Section 143-318.11A3 to discuss a legal matter with attorneys retained or employed by the county. And we're just expecting some direction from the board, no action in open session.
All right. Is there a motion to go into closed session? Second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, we're in closed session, and as Mr. Frew said, when we come back out of closed session, we won't do any further business. We'll simply adjourn.